A live set for an electronic musician is kind of a big deal. At least, I think it is. It is for me. And I'm not talking about DJing here, even though that's a perfectly valid way to do a live set as an electronic musician. I'm more interested in making all the sounds from scratch and using improvisational skills when you're doing your live sets. Last summer I did my first electronic live set, and it was really fun, but I did a lot of preparing, and it was a lot of agonizing, and did a lot of buying, and I sacrificed a couple of my very valuable sessions on Monday. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal for me, and I want to share that with you. So today I want to go over the live set, the ingredients that go into it, and my reasoning for getting all those pieces of hardware to make my live set with. Going over the entire live set is going to be kind of a big thing, so I'm going to break it up in multiple episodes. So this episode we're just going to look at the ingredients that go in there and why I picked those pieces of hardware. I was asked to do a live show at Cube Festival this summer, and I would be the only electronic musician in a lineup of over 200 artists, except for 3 but he kind of logged out after a while. I had the brilliant idea of doing a 5-hour-long ambient improvisational show, and the director of the festival thought it was a brilliant idea, and we're really good friends now. We were kind of messing around with the placement of my set, so that it wouldn't interfere with other artists like the singer-songwriters and the poets and the piano marathon guy. And those people were scheduled much easier. And, I was doing a 5-hour set, so I couldn't really be scheduled. I was just going to do a marathon. We settled on the museum lobby. There was nobody else playing there, so I wouldn't be bothering anyone. We still made it a silent lounge, though, so that's wearing headphones. And this kind of presents its own challenges, but it really also opens up a lot of new possibilities that a speaker system does not have. I might talk about that some other time as well. That was really interesting, and it really shaped the way I made this live set. A 5-hour-long improvisational ambient live set with headphones in a museum. I don't see much on your resume talking about this, so let's break this down. Long sessions. Yes, sir. I am used to 12-hour sessions. Yeah, so that's right. And improvisational skills. With vocals, a little bit, but with instruments, not so much. No, never actually. Do you have any experience with live shows at all? I played in a band once. That's all you had to say. You're in. Congratulations. Great. Okay, the premise is clear now, I think. At the time, I had some gear to work with. At this point, I was going for a setup with 2 launch pads working alongside each other as the main attraction, one launching clips and the other being a keyboard with kind of a weird layout. And that wasn't a bad idea. It was a bit finicky. I was using a remote script called Launchpad 95, and Launchpad 95 really increases their usefulness tenfold. More on that in the future. It's still a bit finicky and prone to accidental button pressing. But then, Christmas came early. I thought I was going to use a guitar for a live show. I'm glad I didn't. Still love you, Dolores. I got vacation money, which is 8% of a yearly salary that your job holds on to, which is about a month's worth of salary. And I also got a huge tax return, which was about a month's worth. So I got all these babies. The main attractions of the live set are the APC 40 and the MIDI Fighter Twister. I'll get back to this one in a sec. The APC 40, anyone that has used Ableton Live for any extended amount of time will feel very familiar with the layout. Here you can have the tracks 1 through 8 and a master track. Here's some effects. You got a crossfader and you got a buttons. It's very dusty. I haven't used it in a while. Yeah, you got your faders and the clip launch buttons. You got a clip stop. You got your solo and your record and your mute buttons and everything. It's very familiar. It took me about 2 minutes to feel comfortable with this. It took me about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to really understand everything that it can do, which is pretty quick for a piece of hardware with so many buttons on it. It goes pretty deep. These buttons automatically map. It's a really good piece of tech. It's not cheap. I think it's around the €300 range. Not sure, but it definitely isn't cheap. You know what else isn't cheap? It's the MIDI Fighter Twister. Let's put this down. MIDI Fighter Twister. It's small. It's about as expensive as the APC 40. And it has just 16 rotary knobs. They are endless encoders, so you can keep turning them forever, which is exactly what I wanted. And this replaced the Behringer X-Touch. And boy, does it do a lot more than I thought it would. The ratings on the internet on this thing are ridiculous. Everyone loves it. And I didn't really understand why. I knew that I wanted to have all these knobs, but why was it so well rated? I thought, well, people just really love the feeling of these knobs. They are very, very thick metal, and it just feels very sturdy, but it actually has such great software, and that's really what makes this thing so valuable. These knobs, these 16, can turn into 128 different knobs. Each knob can control 8 different parameters if you map it that way. And you can map it a whole bunch of ways. This is gonna need an entire video because you cannot find on internet all the stuff this thing does. It took me longer to learn this thing than the APC 40. It can do so much. I still haven't figured out the whole shebang of the thing. You can map it. It's ridiculous. This stuff controls all of my vocals. It controls high pass, low pass filters on every track in the entire live set. It has effects on it. It goes so deep. It's amazing. Really, really worth the money. It's expensive, but it's worth the money. Now I really want the MIDI Fighter knob thing. Not the twister, but the other one, the buttons. That's also expensive. Oh, and yeah, together with this and the APC 40, these two together, I have a total of 16 tracks for clip launching and all that. This one's broken, but I have another one. So it's great. I can do so much with just these 3 things. These basically form the heart of the live set. All the hardware I'm using is controlling MIDI, except for the microphone. And the goal of all these controllers is to be able to control the entire Ableton Live project file without having to touch my laptop. But John, I might hear you ask, couldn't you use a Push 2, the Ableton Push 2? It is fantastic and it controls Ableton. And I would say, I did try that and I didn't like it. I tried it about 2 years ago, and the problem with that is that it feels like Ableton on the computer, but just a more kind of clunky version of it. It has everything in there, pretty much, but it's just really clunky, and all the buttons, it's so big, and it's a bit too much. I don't like menu diving, and with the Ableton Push 2, I have to menu dive a lot. and I didn't want to do that in this live set. I wanted to just have all the controls laid out in the way that Ableton Live has them laid out, without me having to scroll through all sorts of functionality and multifunctional buttons and learn that whole stuff. I just want to have this stuff, just these pads do one thing. I want to have this stuff, and then just these pads do one thing, and I can just kind of go press this button. Ooh, it's dusty. I press this button, and it just does one other thing. Really easy stuff. I don't like the push 2, but I might like the push 3. I mean, I might still get it for some other reason, but not for this live show. It doesn't really work. So what am I controlling in Ableton Live? I control this live project in 4 categories, if you will, each with their own place in the hardware I just mentioned. And these categories are MIDI instruments, live instruments, samples, and effects processing. For my MIDI instruments, I've prepared a bunch of preset sounds in virtual synthesizers like Massive and Reactor and Contact, mostly Native Instrument stuff. There's 6 different tracks in which I can load a collection of instruments like keys, pads, bass, or sequences, and all these tracks have 5 different sounds that I can select on the fly. So that means that at any moment, I have access to 30 different MIDI instruments divided over 6 tracks. Then I have the live instruments, which I plan on being a guitar or a bass, and a microphone. Ended up being 2 microphone tracks, both with a looper effect on there. The first track feeds into the second track so I can record clips into it, build up vocal loops, and take some parts away. It's a little bit better than just having a looper effect. Then I have however many tracks I want to use for samples. I try to keep it to 8 because that fits on my APC-40 and my Launchpad. And I try to color coordinate in a way that's somewhat pleasing to the eye but still distinguishable on the hardware in terms of patterns and colors. I have tracks with drum loops, sequences, which I sorted to key, sound effects, I got Foley, I got vocals, which is usually just people talking, some other random stuff that I like to use. Then on top of all that, every track has an effect track on it. The effects that are in the rack depend on the type of channel it is. MIDI instruments get some reverbs and delays and such. The microphones get a bunch of stacking delays that are modeled after tape, weird reverbs and other effects, which itself are usually effects tracks as well. And the samples get a similar treatment to the MIDI instruments, with some stutter and beat repeat functionality here and there. Each track also has a special one knob filter that has a low pass when I turn it down and a high pass when I turn it up, and a bypass at 12 o'clock. Well, that's it for the introduction of the live show. I hope it's interesting. I know that this is not the full thing, so we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into all the hardware that I'm using, how I'm using it. We're going to look at Ableton Live, how I set up the whole project file. I'll be sharing it as well at some point. And I know it's far from perfect. It's got a clear goal in mind. Don't try and make techno with it. It doesn't really work very well. We'll see if we can change it up to be able to do that. And if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments, and I'll try to work them into a next video. If you want to support me and be notified when you see the next video, you know how YouTube works. And if you're really crazy and think this video might even help out a friend of yours, go show it to them. That was the video.